Zoom into wine. We get to talk to some of the great industry experts, leaders in the business of wine. And I'm so excited to introduce you to Chris Hermann. He is a wine industry attorney and helps with vast transactions worldwide in the wine industry. And then he got the bug to start his own wine brand with his wife. And now today is like one of the cult wines of Oregon. And we're so excited to have you here, Chris. Thank you for letting us talk about double O wines and introducing our people to your incredible project.
Good morning, Ian. Yeah, I'm Chris Herman. I am sitting in Carlton, Oregon, a small village of a couple thousand people in the Willamette Valley, just south of Portland. My wife Catherine and I started the Zero Zero Wine Project in 2015. It's just the two of us, we're a very lean, mean machine, but we're focused, hyper focused on making very exciting Pinot Noir and Chardonnay in the Willamette Valley. We also, by the way, produce wine in the Côte d'Or in France and have a winery just outside Beaune. And we also produce Blanc de Blanc champagne in Menil-sur-Orge in the Côte de Blanc, which is the heart of the fine champagne production area in France. So we have a three-legged stool. So we get a lot of airline miles going back and forth, but it's all in pursuit of making extraordinary Chardonnay and Pinot Noir based wines in the three greatest winemaking regions for this fruit in the world, the Willamette Valley, the Côte d'Or, and the Côte de Blanc. So why did we do it?
Chris, I got to interject real quick before I forget. But you're working with a friend of mine in Champagne, Paul Lanoise.
Yes.
I love what he's doing, and I
Yep.
think you've got a great partner there. I'm super excited about tasting the bubble someday. We're going to take a group to Champagne in November, and I'm planning on including him in our activities. So
Fantastic. Well, he
yeah,
has a beautiful new tasting room, and you'll have a chance to taste our champagne when you're there as well. By the way, all of our wine and champagne is produced under the zero zero label. So you
right.
might ask, why did we do it? Why zero zero? The reason we did it is, as Ian mentioned, I've been involved as a lawyer and business advisor with the wine industry in Oregon and Europe and Asia since the early 1980s. So I've seen a lot of projects, a lot of great projects, and what we realized was that living in the Willamette Valley primarily at that time, we were at a place where we had some of the greatest fruit on earth. And I was working with a client by the name of Dominique Lafont, who you may have heard of, one of the great winemakers, particularly white wine in Burgundy. And he was working on a project here in Oregon, and I was working with him as the attorney for the project. I asked him why he had come to Oregon since he was such a famous guy based in Burgundy. He said, Chris, it's because the Chardonnay and Pinot Noir grown in the Willamette Valley in Oregon is the highest quality fruit for those two varietals grown anywhere in the New World. So I listened to that. It took me a few years to digest it, but ultimately my father and Richard Herman and my wife Catherine and I decided to take a shot at producing wine using methods not used by anyone else in the Willamette Valley to see if we could produce a wine that basically expanded the boundaries of what could be coming out of the Willamette Valley. So that was 2015. Here we are 10 years later. We're now making about 5,000 cases of wine in Oregon, Burgundy, and Champagne. Our focus is primarily Chardonnay. As you can see on this slide, that's one of our Chardonnay bottles. But we also make Pinot Noir. We're very excited to make Pinot Noir. And in the realm of Pinot Noir, what we do, and you're going to be tasting our 2022 VGR. I'll talk a little bit more about the specific techniques that we use. But one of the important things to understand is that Oregon is a very northerly climate. It's definitely a cool climate, a little bit on this along the same lines as Burgundy. So we're about 500 miles north of Napa. We're about 1,000 miles north of Santa Barbara. So when you're drinking our wine and comparing it to California Pinots, key thing to keep in mind is that we're definitely very cool climate. And the reason that's important is in this very northerly cool climate, the grapes retain their natural acidity to an extent that provides the lift and the vitality. That's really the hallmark of Oregon Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. Um, the Oregon wine industry started in the late 1960s. The focus initially, and really since that time, has been on Pinot Noir, which is why we make a Pinot Noir. You see on the slide here, the wine you're going to be tasting is called VGR. That stands for Very Good Red. The reason for that is having been a wine consumer, the kind of person Ian loves for many, many decades. I often would have a wine that I really enjoyed, and a couple days later, I could not remember the name of the wine. So Catherine and I decided that when we make a wine, our largest production on the red side, which is VGR, and on the white side, which is VGW, very good white, we were going to give the wines a name, an acronym that would be relatively simple to remember and would also stand out on the shelf in a wine shop or in a restaurant, again, making it easier for people to see what was our product. Why 00? Uh, we wanted to be, excuse me, very focused on what we were making. So we make only two varietals. Pinot Noir, that's one of the zeros. Chardonnay, it's the other zero. And the reason for zero is that in numerology, zero is the symbol for potential. And the whole idea behind our project was to try to take this very fantastic fruit that we have in the Willamette Valley and produce it in ways that no one else was producing to see if we could create a wine that really had extraordinary flavor, aromatic, and textural qualities that really had never been seen before in wines produced in this region. And so that was the genesis behind the project. The reason our label looks the way that it looks is because we have a winery in Burgundy, because we've spent a lot of time in Burgundy. As Ian knows, in the cellar, a lot of the Burgundian people keep their wine for several years in big metal bins. The cellars are very humid, and so they don't label the wines until they're ready to ship them for sale. So what they do is they take chalk and they will write on the bottle some sort of symbol indicating which vineyard it is and which vintage it is. And we really like the look of that. It's spare, it's clean, it's iconic. And so because we're sort of bridging the Willamette Valley and France, Burgundy in particular, we thought it would be exciting and appropriate and a good symbol of that connection to use a design which incorporated that Burgundian approach. So that's why we have it simple like this. That's why we have that sort of a rough outline. It's really intended to be reminiscent of a chalk mark on the bottle.
So, Chris, do you ever get any conversation about, 00 could also lean into the ideas of, low manipulation, zero manipulation, zero inputs, that type of a
Yeah.
conversation?
Yes, it's really not the reason that we selected the name, but really all of those things also characterize our wine production style.
Mhm.
And so we're, again, because it's just the two of us, Catherine and me, and we have an assistant here in Oregon. I have an assistant in Burgundy, an assistant in Champagne. We're really totally hands-on. We do everything ourselves in a very small facility in Carlton, and then our own facility in Burgundy, and our own facility in Champagne. So we're working very closely in the vineyard. We're there for harvest. We do all of the production work ourselves at harvest. We pick, we sort, we crush, we press, we go into bottle. We're really there every step of the way because our commitment to our buyers is that you're going to get something that is really a handcraft. And when people talk about handcraft, I literally use my own hands to do all of that work. So it's the ultimate in handcraft. Um, and on the Pinot Noir side, I think an example of our dedication to handcraft is the Shea, the VGR wine that you're going to drink is made up of wines from several different vineyards, the Shea Vineyard, all in the Willamette Valley, the Highland Vineyard, that's Hyland, the Richard Hermann Vineyard, the Chehalem Mountain Vineyard, and Stardance. So it's a composition wine that is a blend from these different vineyards. And the reason we do that is we have two main soil types in the Willamette Valley, volcanic and marine sedimentary. And so we pick the fruit from these different soil series because the volcanic soils tend to be much more nervy, tense, a lot of vitality that comes from the minerals in the volcanic soil. The Pinots from the sedimentary soils, and that would be, for example, the Chehalem Mountain and the Stardance, those are much sort of deeper, more profound wines. So we sort of call it the yin yang wine because we're taking Pinot Noir fruit from these two sort of fundamentally different soil sources in different regions. All of the all of the wine is coming either from the Eola Amity Hills or the Chehalem Mountains or McMinnville. So we're getting different sites, different elevations, different aspects. And so we're bringing this together as kind of an orchestral composition to give people a sense of kind of all aspects of the Willamette Valley wine. So there's a nice picture of the Willamette Valley. That's exactly the kind of terrain that we have. As I said, it's a cool climate. It's a northerly climate, which means we're relatively lower in alcohol. We really focus on finesse. And as I was saying before, an example of our handcraft is that for most of these vineyards, I mean, we pick and vinify separately. And the wine that comes here from the Shea, the Highland, the Richard, and the Shale Mountain, this is all produced using what we call the snip method. What does that mean? What it means is when the picking bins come into the winery full of this beautiful Pinot Noir fruit after having been growing and aging on the vine for 100 days, we get this gorgeous fruit at 22.5, 23.5 Brix, meaning it has enough sugar to provide really a beautiful body for the wine, but is going to be a wine that's relatively low alcohol. But here the key is we bring that fruit in, it comes in picking bins. Catherine and I sit down with a crew of about 10 or 15 people that we hire every year. We take each cluster and we have each of us has a pair of scissors. We snip every single berry off of the cluster. So there's a little mini stem called the pedicel, which connects the berry to one of the side or main stems. We snip each berry off at the pedicel, and that means we're going to have hundreds of thousands of berries, and we put them into 500-liter or half-ton Italian terracotta amphora, which are those sort of big clay vessels that have been used in the Mediterranean for millennia. And we put the individual berries into the amphora and fill up the amphora, seal it, close it with a huge topping of dry ice, close it up so that there's no oxygen in there. And then those individual Pinot Noir berries go through a carbonic maceration. So kind of like, Beaujolais, but the carbonic maceration here is a maceration inside a Vinus vinifera Pinot Noir berry, which is the most beautiful Pinot Noir fruit in Oregon and really among the most beautiful in the world. So what happens is we get an internal fermentation going in those berries, which essentially involves enzymes inside the berries breaking down the internal flesh and interior skin. So we're extracting the most perfumed elements and flavors of the Pinot Noir berry. And we're doing it in an environment where there's no oxygen, which means that whenever you expose grape juice or grapes to oxygen, they start to change chemically, and basically the flavors start to soften and dull a little bit. Here we're getting the most perfect extraction of Pinot Noir flavors and aromatics. And then once that carbonic maceration is gone for about a week, so we know that extraction has occurred, then we open up the amphora, we crush the berries inside the amphora, and then the primary fermentation extends in out over the next couple of weeks. So after about 3 weeks, the fermentation is done. We take essentially the must from the amphora, put it in a press. We collect the press juice. The wine that you would drink in this VGR is about 95% free run. And then we do one light press cut to get just a little bit of wine with a little bit more tannin in it. So we know we're going to have really wonderful structure. But we have a very pure, excuse me, pure and fragrant aromatic wine at that point. The other thing that happens because the amphora are very porous, oxygen is coming in through the walls of the amphora during the fermentation, and this has a very two very critical impacts. One is it softens the tannins. So a lot of young New World Pinot Noir will have a little bit of grip, maybe a lot of grip, and a little greenness, a little, also our soils here are much more vigorous than they are in Burgundy and in Champagne. And so we're trying to manage the tannins in the wines from the very first phase of the wine production. And we do that by oxygenating the must, which, as I said, softens the tannins, gives the wine a very beautiful texture. And then also what happens is because the walls of the amphora porous, we get a little bit of alcohol respiring out through the walls of the amphora, which means that if we bring in fruit that should have a natural alcohol of, say, 14% or 13.5 or 13, we're going to end up with a finished wine that's about 0.5% lower in alcohol because we've had a natural reduction
Evaporation.
in the alcohol. So that, again, is going to showcase the beauty, the finesse of the Pinot Noir. And that's really what's so important about Pinot, and the reason it makes sense for everyone to go to so much trouble to grow it and make it, because it is a difficult grape to work with, is because ultimately you can get these really very fine, elusive aromatics and flavors, which are really the hallmark of Pinot. And then once we've finished with that, collecting the free run, doing the one press cut. Then we put the wine in barrel. We use only new French oak barrels, primarily from a cooper called Damy, Damy. It's the cooper that all the hotshots in Meursault, Lafon, Coche, Aunt, you name them. It's really the best barrel. It's a tiny family-owned cooperage there that is 1,000% focused on producing the highest quality barrels. And that's, again, our philosophy is we spend whatever it takes to get the best grapes, best corks, best bottles, best everything, barrels, and that way we're going to produce a wine that is going to be really an expression of what we're looking for, which is producing, something that's really extraordinary.
For all the reasons you just listed, the wine is extraordinary. We're going to taste it now with our audience. I'm going to get an email back to you after we're done. But
Okay.
the wine is beautiful. It is
Yep.
pretty. It is
Yes.
it has got a tenderness to it that I really enjoy. Not only is your wine kind of hot to trot, but it also delivers. And we're going to sell those few bottles that we have left. We'll be moving into the next vintage, but it is really an extreme pleasure to be able to chat with you about this exciting project and to enlighten some, to further excite others that already know, but to be able to taste these wines is really what we're all about. And I'm excited about your future and hope that we can cross paths many times.
Great. Thank you so much for taking a minute to chat with me. The only other quick note I wanted to make is that people should know that this 22 vintage is really an extraordinary vintage. It was the latest vintage in Oregon, really, certainly in decades. We didn't pick the fruit that has from these vineyards that's in this wine until mid to late October. We're normally picking in early to mid-September. The reason that it happened was because we had an early frost, which delayed the growing season by about a month. But the impact that it had, which was quite interesting, was that the fruit was hung for much longer and it was later in the season. So it was really ripening in September and October, which means it was not ripening during the normally warmer months of July and August. That
Mm.
adds to the finesse of the wine.
Oh, fascinating. And that cutting of the berries off the stem,
Mhm.
the rachis, and only leaving the pip into the berry, does
Yes.
that still basically count as a little bit of a whole cluster element, that
It
little
is.
piece?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is essentially the same as whole cluster with the advantage that we don't get any of the tang, which you may like or not like from the stems. So we're getting a purer expression ultimately of the Pinot because you're just fermenting and ultimately crushing the berries themselves with nothing else. And the reason it's so important to have those be whole berries again, have just that little pip still there, is that way we know that initial fermentation is going to be taking place without any exposure to oxygen. And that's again is really critical to extracting the ultimate sort of purity from this. I have to say we don't take credit for this method. We actually learned about it because we work in Burgundy. It's something that Lalou Bisleroy uses for really the very top single vineyard Musigny Chambertin wines. In the U.S., as far as I know, no one is doing this. Except Antica Terra does it for a part of their project they call the Lillian wines, which is a
Oh, yeah.
small Syrah project. But other than Maggie, who is a wonderful person to be in Oregon with us, as far as I know, no one is doing it because it's just enormously labor intensive. I mean, it takes us 5 or 6 hours of 10 to 50 people snipping to fill one amphora. And to generate the wine that's in this VGR in our single vineyards, we have 16 amphora. So you can see that there's an awful lot of coming back to the idea of handcrafted. There's an awful lot of handcrafting going into this. And by the way, at the end of harvest, I can barely move my fingers because they
Oh, I bet.
spend so much time going like this. But it's definitely worth it. I mean, it's a wine that is unique. We enjoy making it. We love drinking it, and we hope that you and the folks that are joining you on the tasting today will enjoy it as well.
Tremendous. All right. Well, fascinating. Definitely some unique ideas going on, and I think the results speak for themselves. So thank you, Chris, and
Welcome.
I look forward to seeing you again.
Yep. Same here, Ian. Take care. Have a good day, everybody. Bye bye.
Thank you.